later. My name is Bianca. I'm a career advisor over at Career Services. I'm going to walk you all through how to become a standout applicant. And so I work with a lot of seniors who tell me, is my application like even being seen? Like, am I just like in a pool of applicants, right? Like, how do I make myself stand out? I've got some tips for you. So what we're going to cover today, crafting your professional story. What the heck is a professional story? Like, how do you know what yours is? And then we're also going to talk about how you write dynamic experience descriptions. And so a lot of people will put, oh, this is, just exactly what I did. Like I cleaned tables or I wrote emails or I did things, right? And that's great. But we're going to talk about how you can like elevate those and make them kind of work in your favor to stand out as an applicant. Also, going to utilize storytelling techniques to convey a personal story. So I got my master's of fine arts in writing, for those of you that don't know. And so a lot of times I like to use storytelling techniques like in application materials to make it stand out. Because let's face it, people read a lot of application materials, but who doesn't know a good story, right? Who doesn't have a good narrative? And so like tell a story with your materials to help you stand out from everybody else that's just like, hello, my name is so-and-so, please hire me. So we're gonna help you stand out. Last thing we're gonna talk about a little bit is conveying your professional story on LinkedIn. Morgan has agreed to let me show you hers. She's got a wonderful LinkedIn account, wonderful LinkedIn profile. She's one of our student assistants in Career Services. So your professional story. Sorry, y'all, I'm trying to stay in line of the camera, but not block the screen. And I am very bad at multitasking. So your professional story. What I mean when I use this phrase is this is the narrative of who you are and how your skills and interests direct your career. So you all have one right now, even if you think that you don't. Even if you're like, I haven't had that much experience yet, you still have one. But I know all of you sitting in this room have had really good experiences, so you all definitely have a professional story you can tell. And so this is the part of the activity where you can use the paper and the pen that I gave you. And like I mentioned to you all, I'm going to ask you some questions. So for those of you watching the recording, I'm cutting out the part where the participants that are in person are talking about things in their life. So we're going to skip over that in the recording. What I want y'all to do is scatter these words on your paper. So if you've got multiple majors, write both of those. If you've got any minors, any jobs that you've had, hobbies or internships, write those down and then draw a circle around them. So I'll give you a second to do that. So the next thing I'm going to have you all do is around each of those words, you can connect lines to them. And while you think about the skills and the experiences that you gain from those things. So I know you probably don't have time to do all of it today, but start thinking about, okay, what skills have I gained from my major? Or what skills have I gained from my, my job or internship that I'm participating in? The reason that I brought this up was I want you to think about the skills that stand out to you. And if you notice any themes, and so like, I like to think back actually to when I was an undergraduate. I never did anything like this. I wish I had, because I would have realized if I was looking at like themes or skills that stuck out to me, that I've always done work that involved people, that involved mentoring. That was something that I always really enjoyed. And everything that I did as an undergrad typically involved writing. And so that's actually a huge component of what my role is as a career advisor, writing and mentoring people. And I did put that together as an undergraduate, and that's something I wish I would have found out sooner. We just had a great conversation about some of the skills that stood out to the people that are in person. And so for you, those of you that are watching this recording later, I'd love for you to do this yourself and think about the skills that stand out to you and the themes. And particularly because, you know, the reason I think this is so helpful is I was just saying to the in-person participants that when it's you, like it's hard to see that it's a skill, or you may not see necessarily as a skill set. And so I think taking stock of what you've done and what you've learned can really help you think about like what kinds of jobs also interest you. So we're talking about applications today, but I think this is also helpful for any of you that are like, oh, I'm not exactly sure yet what I want to do. Taking stock of your skills can be really helpful. And so saying like, oh, wow, I really enjoy, you know, social media, you know, or designing graphics, right? Like, that's really cool. Like, what ways can I incorporate that into a job? Because I think a lot of people assume that like you have like a job title in mind when you're searching. Not always. It's really sometimes a skill set. You're thinking like, I want to edit, or I want to write, or I want to like design graphics, right? And so like thinking of like how those skill sets can orient you in a job search versus trying to like just type just you know a job title like in a search bar, because I think that can be more challenging. So how do you utilize this information in an application? Like we talked about, you think about these experiences, both work and non-work, that have led you to pursue this also, right? So thinking about like, what's the motivation? And then when you're looking at a specific position that interests you, ask yourself why these things appeal to you and what it may say about your motivations and values, right? And I think, you know, knowing all of that it makes it easier for you to communicate it and to tell someone why you're a good fit, right? And so we're going to get into the cover letter in a second, but I think a really good thing about your professional story is like understanding what motivates you, understanding what you've done, and understanding the skills that you've developed. You're going to be able to communicate that far more easily than somebody that has not taken stock of their past experiences and thought about how it's prepared them for a future job, right? And so that's what's going to help your application stand out. I also want to talk about writing resume descriptions, because like I mentioned earlier, I see a lot of descriptions that are just very like, I did this, I set a table, you know, I helped customers, like, but we want to take that one step further. And again, think about your skill sets, right? And so you might even look at the activity that we did today and get inspiration from some of that to like utilize in your resume, because you kind of thought about the skills that you have. And so I want to give you some examples, but first I want you to think about the employer's perspective, right? And so each description can be adjusted for specific positions. So if there's a variety of positions, maybe you're applying to 2 different types of jobs, right? You can have those resume oriented more for those types of jobs. And the reason I say to think about the employer's perspective is because a lot of applicants, and I was guilty of this, so this is me also, you think about what you're going to get out of the job, right? And you're like, oh, this is going to be a really great experience for me. The employer is thinking about what value you add to their team, and you need to make them see that, right? And the way that you make them see that is through your application materials. So that means tailoring your descriptions, right? So thinking about what are the skills that they're looking for, and are you integrating that into your resume? You can even use keywords, right? Like that's totally fine. You know, if they say something like teamwork or collaborative or whatever, and you want to throw that in your resume, you totally can. And I think it's helpful. And don't be afraid to customize it. So like adjusting header names, right? So like, it's okay to have a section that says campaigning experience. It's okay to have a section that says graphic design experience, right? Like, that's totally fine. And in fact, I think that's better because then when an employer is looking at your resume, they're already looking at it through the lens of like, oh, this is somebody that's already done this work. You're not making them dig for it. You're making it really clear. Because people tend to look at resumes very quickly. I read a stat. I don't know if this is true, but I think I saw it on Glassdoor. It was like something about they spend less than like 15 seconds reading a resume typically. And I don't say that to be scary. I say that to just say, think about what you're putting on your resume and think about what you're calling your sections and things to make them want to keep reading, right? And so to really grab their attention. And you want to make the most of your descriptions. So if you accomplish something in a position, think about that, right? Again, not just saying, oh, I did X, Y, and Z, but if you accomplish something, we should definitely include that in your description. So I want to give you an example. Somebody might say, oh, I wrote 50 fundraising emails. Okay, but if I'm an employer, right, and I'm just looking at that, it doesn't tell me much, to be honest. Like, it's telling me you're writing emails, but like, were they effective? What did they accomplish, right? Like, you're not really giving me, I guess, much context. But instead, if you say, created our first fundraising program and raised over $34,000 over 6 months by writing 50 fundraising emails, that paints me a much better picture. That tells me like, wow, your emails are effective. You must be a good communicator. Oh, you actually helped create it. That's cool. Okay, you have some initiative. You're probably a creative thinker. And wow, you raised money. That's great. So context is super helpful whenever you can add it. And I have an example about that as well. Let me go back. So a lot of people have like camp counselor jobs, and so I use that as an example, but just saying like, oh, I'm responsible for campers. Again, it doesn't tell me a whole lot, like what was the age range? Like, was it a big group of kids? Because saying like 2 campers is different from like 100. So like, again, I'm not sure what this person did exactly. But instead, if you say facilitated activities for groups of 20 campers, ages 8 to 10, again, very brief, right? We don't even necessarily need the types of activities, depending on the job, but facilitated tells me like you took charge. That shows you in a position of leadership. The group tells me like, oh, okay, cool, you were in charge of a larger group of people, right? And then the age range, I threw that in there because it can be helpful if you're applying to a job that involves maybe working with other kids and you want to provide the context of the age range. But any questions so far? Anything? No? Okay, I'll leave time at the end too, but just wanted to check in. I also want y'all to think about transferable skills. This is really helpful, especially if you're applying for a job that you've never done before, but you have the skills to do it, right? So let's say you have the coursework, right? Or you've done something maybe like in a lab setting, but maybe you haven't been paid for it, but you're like, I think I could do this. And so the way that you really get that across is by demonstrating transferable skills. And so like, this is an example about a service industry job, because I know a lot of students will work in retail or restaurants, things like that. And they're like, oh, does that ever really matter? Well, it can if you're applying to something where you're interacting with people, right? And so an example of that is just saying, responding to customer inquiries in a positive manner to establish a welcoming store environment. Which of course is just a fancier way of being like, I answered customer questions, but it looks a lot better than just saying like, I helped people, I answered questions. Because again, it shows you creating a positive environment, being able to interact with people. And so thinking about, the jobs that you've got on your resume, what are skills that you can pull from them that relate to the job that you're applying for, particularly if you're in a position where you're applying to jobs that maybe you haven't done exactly just yet, but you feel like you can do. And also, I encourage you to add a skill section if it is helpful. I give this little caveat, like if it's helpful, because remember, you want to tailor your resume in a way that best conveys your skills and experiences. Not a like, I saw my friend do this, or my friend has this, or my classmate has this, because y'all have different experiences. And so have the sections that make the most sense for you. Only include the things that make sense to you. And so, for example, you can have something about research where you list, particular things that you feel comfortable doing that relate to the job. Graphic design software is another example. Field software, certifications. And these are just a few examples. There's lots more, but again, thinking about what does this job require and what skills do I have that match up to it? Because sometimes people will do is they will put these things within experience descriptions, which, okay, that can be helpful. But again, if we're thinking from the perspective of somebody is quickly scanning your resume, this is where taking those skills like out of those paragraphs, out of those bullet points, and actually putting them in their own section can draw more attention to it, make it a little bit easier to read, and an employer can very quickly assess, oh, great, they know how to use that software. We need them to know how to use this job. Great. Any questions so far before we jump to cover letters? Okay. So, as I said to y'all, I'm speaking to you as a creative writer who's also a career advisor. So this is where some of my tips are coming from. I'm going to talk to you about how you can make your cover letters more engaging and help you stand out a little bit. Now, I will say there's nothing wrong with a traditional like, hi, I am writing to apply to blank job, right? But if there is a position that just really strikes you, right, that you just feel so excited about and you really want to make sure that you stand out, a really good way to do it is through more of a narrative. So we're going to go through an example. This is actually from an actual Eckerd student. So I didn't make it up. I didn't want it to sound like something that was like very unrealistic. This is from an actual student who gave me permission. They were applying to a Navy Marine Mammal internship. So this is an internship, not a job, but like same principles apply. So I want to show you just snippets of it. This is the introduction, which looks very long on the screen, but it's because we're going to slide it on a doc. I promise it's not that long. But if y'all want to take a moment, I'll pause so you can read it. Can everybody see it okay? Before I share my thoughts and observations, do y'all want to say anything that sticks out to you reading this intro? Anybody else want to share any observations? It's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And like actually interesting. Like I think I'd probably read the rest of that because you're going through like you have like I don't know like applicants, and I'm just saying like hello, I'm applying for this position. I'm like yeah, I know you are like you're here.
Yeah.
But like if I saw that, I'd be like okay, how does this tie into my job?
Yeah. That's what I thought too. Like I was really struck with this because like I said, I helped the student, but like they came to me with the job that already looked like this. So like we reworked it, but like they already came in to the appointment saying, hey, I told a story. Is that weird? And like they actually were like not sure if they could do it. They were like, am I allowed to do this? And I was like, yes, like absolutely. Because to your point, Jenna, it's like they start to like blend. And then some people too, some applicants, like they're very big in their cover letters, and then it super starts to blend. Because you see a lot of like, and I've had to review cover letters for Eckerd, and you read enough of them, they just say like the same words over and over. I am a good team player. I am motivated. I am dedicated. Like blah 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 blah. And it's just like you're like, okay, this isn't telling me anything really about you. So the cool thing about this, I thought too, was like it tells me a story and I'm intrigued and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is happening here? And keep in mind, like this is for a Navy internship, right? So like, it makes sense within the context. So I'm not a fan, I'm not promoting like, tell any random story, just tell a story. Like, no, it needs to relate back, right? But yeah, this is something that I feel like I can actually, I'm there with this person and visualizing it. I'm like, whoa, like the stakes are so high, like what's going on? Um, and so that's what I thought was cool about this one. But even if you're not applying to something that's creative writing, right? Like people love stories. And so like make them care, right? Tell them something interesting. But like I mentioned, making sure that it all connects back. This is how they did that. I'll let y'all read. And you can see too, like they're very specific here. Like they weren't just like, I was good at it, right? Somebody might just stop there, like, oh, I was good at this thing. They actually specifically note like what they were good at, like delegating, handling stress, right? And then, because I mentioned this is an internship and not a job, right? We get the whole like, this is what's making me think about my career. So that's something that you all would probably not write about as much, but like, oh, my career plans in a cover letter for a job. But that's why that's in here because it's an internship. But you can see that they start to like actually talk about like the specific skills that they gain from the experience. Because again, a story is great, but a story is only great if it connects back to the position. So like if they had left us with that story and not given me this, I would have been like, this is really random. This is this is too random. But they actually know like this is what I gained from that experience. Like this is what I'm able to do. And then you always want to make sure that you show employers the value that you add. So this is the paragraph about that. Again, one thing I just want to point out is the specificity of it. So, not just saying I gained a bunch of skills, but oh, I gained time management skills, right? This is at the intersection of both of my interests, and all of these things have taught me work ethic, how to be part of a team, and I've learned research skills. So like they're being very specific. So I think that the biggest difference for me, right, is the cover letter is not effective. We'll just say things like, I am a motivated person, right? Who wants to work with animals and serve my community? Or I am somebody who has a strong work ethic, but like with no context, because like that means something different to everybody. So I think giving those examples help us see like, what does this person mean by a strong work ethic? I kind of summarized it all because I know we went through a lot with that cover letter. So again, those were just snippets of it, not the whole thing. But the biggest thing I hope you take away from this is show, don't tell, right? So like, don't just say, like we said, oh, I'm motivated or I've got a great work ethic, but like clearly state that, like give us examples, give us context, clearly state any lessons or skills that you came from an experience that relate back to the position that you're applying to. And again, be very employer centered. Show them the value that you add, right? And I was just working with someone the other day who had like a fantastic cover letter. It was so good. But the one thing that we had to shift was they were focusing very much on like what they were going to gain out of the experience. They were like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to use my background, my coursework in this job. And that's great. Like excitement is good. But again, how does that translate into what you're going to contribute to their team? Like that's what they want to know. And so if we shifted that and instead we're like, do my coursework or my experiences or whatever the case is, right? That's what I think contribute to your team. And like you can clearly state that. And then you want to tailor it to specific employers. And of course, I'm all about working smarter, not harder. And I've told everybody in this room that, like, So yes, if you're applying to certain jobs that are very similar, like if you're applying to 5 campaigning jobs, your campaigning experiences, that's not gonna change. But what's gonna change is like your motivation to work with that particular organization, right? And so those small edits can go a long way, because I will tell you all from experience of like having served on different committees here for hiring, when I read a cover letter that's super vague, I don't even want to interview them, to be honest. Like, I'm not that interested. I'm like, wow, they didn't say anything about Eckerd at all. I'm like, do they even know what we do? Like, do they understand? Like, I don't know. So I'm not super interested if they don't even bother to make like small changes. Because like I said, your experience isn't gonna change, but like the why of the organization, like, yeah, that should change. But those small edits go a long way. And then this is where I'm gonna bring up Morgan's profile. So for those of you that are watching this recording, I'm not gonna be on the recording right now because I'm showing something on the computer, so I'm gonna turn the video off. So Morgan is sitting here in the audience, but she's laughing, she's got a really great LinkedIn profile. So this is why I'm using hers as an example. But one thing I want to point to is like, see up here where we've got 3 words: homicide, voting rights, human rights. And I love that because like a lot of, I think a lot of undergrads, particularly recent grads, will still have things like student or undergrad student, right? And I think that does y'all a disservice in the sense of like, you've developed great skill sets while you're here, right? So don't just say like, oh yeah, I'm just a student, right? But be thinking about the skill sets, be thinking about the things that interest you. So Morgan, that's why I pulled yours up, because I love that you did that. And we've got this like lovely photo. One thing that I've heard from recruiters is that if you don't have a photo, people are less apt to click on you because they're like, are you a real person? I don't know. That's what I hear anyway. So like, that's where I think the value of adding a photo comes in. And then you don't have to add a background photo, but I think it has some nice pizzazz. I think it looks nice. And you can do something that relates to your interest, like as you can see here that Morgan did. But that's something I really wanted to point out. And then we can take a look at the about section. So people have different opinions about this. I'm all for like short and sweet, to be honest. Like I've seen profiles that have like super, super, super long paragraphs, and I don't know, I'm more apt to be like, well, it's a lot of info. I don't know. Like, so I think being really intentional about like what you put on there, particularly because you're gonna have your experiences later on, right? So like, you don't need to necessarily like go through every one of your experiences in the about section, right? This is more to give a snippet about you before they get down into the experiences. Yeah, thank you, Morgan, for letting me use your profile as an example. Yeah, that's all I have for y'all today. The only other thing I wanted to share with you is our website. So if you haven't been on there before, it's career.eckerd.edu. We've got a lot of great resources on there about resumes and cover letters. So I went more in depth today. Like, I went more into like when we're writing descriptions and when we are writing cover letters, how to make them engaging. But on our website, we've got a whole range of topics. So anything from like, I've never written one, what goes on one, what goes on a resume, how do I format them? We've got a lot of stuff on there. But also, if you're watching this later on and you've got questions for me, there is my contact info.